The rescue. The rain on Sarath wasn't like Earth rain. For 3 days, the sky had hissed and spat, sending down water laced with magnetic filaments that sparked against anything they touched. Darien Wex pulled his hood tighter as he climbed the jagged slope above the shattered supply post, his scavenger's instincts telling him to turn back. He wasn't supposed to be in the upper sectors. His license only covered the lower grids, far from the ruins of Imperial palaces and the battle-scarred highlands. But curiosity and survival had always ignored permission. The river below writhed like a living wound, dark and rushing, lined with broken ship plating and bones from long-extinct predators. They called it the Maw for good reason. Over the drone of rain and wind, Darien heard something that didn't belong, a sound too small to be thunder, too desperate to be mechanical. A scream. At first, he thought it was a child. He stumbled toward the ledge, heart hammering, hands scraped raw from the climb. When he looked down into the churning water, he saw it, barely visible beneath the foam and debris. A tiny creature thrashed against the current, its fur shimmering silver even in the storm. Long ears pinned back, claws scrabbling against a piece of hull, failing to hold on. It was being pulled under, sucked into the undertow. Darien didn't think. He never did when it mattered. He threw off his gear and dove without hesitation, hitting the river like a stone breaking open a grave. Cold crashed through his chest as the current spun him into a spiral of black water and blood-slick metal. He kicked until his lungs screamed, hand reaching forward, searching. Then he touched it, wet fur, a twisting body, claws that raked his wrist more from instinct than attack. He grabbed the scruff and pulled. The weight was more than it should have been, bones dense and heavy. Not a child. Not any mammal he recognized. But the creature clung to him as if it knew what drowning meant. He broke the surface gasping, the pup half-curled against his chest. Lightning cracked behind them as he dragged himself to the bank and collapsed onto the stone. The creature didn't run. It didn't bite. It shivered violently, soaked and snarling softly, staring up at him with glowing violet eyes that flickered like plasma caught in mist. There was a pattern burned into its side, an intricate sigil, definitely not natural. A mark of status, of breeding. He sat there in the cold, soaked and panting, staring into those impossible eyes. It looked back, and then, softly, it let out a noise. Not a growl, not a yelp. Just a small, broken sound, like it hadn't spoken in years but still remembered how. Darien reached out slowly, brushing the filth from its face. Then the sky exploded. Drop ships, 3 of them, descended in silent formation, their engines lighting the ridge in ghost blue fire. Soldiers in bone-white armor spilled out, weapons raised, eyes burning beneath visors that tracked everything. One of them dropped to his knees the moment he saw the pup. Starfong, he gasped. Darien blinked. What? Another soldier raised his rifle. You touched the air. The pup growled now, lips curling back. The first soldier didn't move. The prophecy, he held her, and she lived. By the worm of winds, another whispered. Darien paled as the weapons trained on him. He looked down again at the soaking wet alien creature clinging to his chest like a cub to its den mother. All he could whisper was, "Oh, hell." The revelation. Darien was bound in chains of burnished electrum before he could even stand. They didn't beat him or shout, the soldiers were far too reverent for that. They wrapped his arms in ceremonial coils designed to both immobilize and bless, each link etched with ancient runes he couldn't read. He was lifted aboard the lead drop ship like cargo. Not criminal, not enemy, but something between relic and threat. The pup, still damp and snarling, leaped into his lap mid-flight, snapping at anyone who came close. They let her. The cabin was silent except for her soft growls. She didn't leave him, not even when the Empress's sent priest tried to coax her into silk-cloaked arms, not even when the ancestral hymns played from the ship's soul core. She lay against Darien's chest, her breath shallow, her tail twitching. A beast that should have killed him, instead, she guarded him. They landed at dusk on the Imperial cradle, the fortress carved into the cliffs of Valthsalher. It was a monolith of obsidian and fire, veined with sky metal, looming over a waterfall of lightning. The stairs alone could kill a mortal from the sheer climb. The palace gates opened without a word. The court had already gathered, a half-moon of high bloods, elders, and flame-horned advisors stood in ritual silence. At the center of the atrium, beneath a throne of spiral iron and sunstone, stood the Empress herself. Zara of the Endless Stair was tall, robed in black-threaded crimson, her crown of bone and gold resting atop storm-colored hair braided with the blood of her ancestors. Her gaze burned through him the moment he entered. The room did not echo. Even the shadows seemed to kneel. The guards dropped Darien to his knees. The pup, Vela, he now knew, leaped between them and the court. The Empress raised one hand. The guards froze. She stepped forward slowly, her voice smooth and ancient, like metal cooled under pressure. "You are the human scavenger from the rim world known as Wexang 9. "Yes," he croaked. "You dragged my daughter from the Maw of Fangs." "I didn't know." "You touched her." Darien swallowed. She was drowning. The court shifted. A few elders hissed. One noble began to speak in protest, but the Empress lifted her hand again. Vela let out a low growl and curled beside Darien. Zara stared down at him with something colder than judgment. "You held the heir of my bloodline, guardian of flame and lore. You touched her in her most vulnerable moment." He nodded slowly. "She touched me back." For the first time, the Empress's eyes moved, not to her daughter, but to Darien's wrists, where the chains had begun to glow with the same violet pulse as Vela's mark. "Bring him to the shrine of ancestry," she said softly. "But Empress," someone protested. She turned, her voice now thunder. "The bloodline has been altered. We will see what the fire says." Darien looked up, heart hammering. Vela pressed her forehead into his chest, and for the first time, he understood. He hadn't saved a life. He had become its center. The trial. They marched him through corridors of living stone, carved by generations of wolf-blood queens who spoke to thunder like it was kin. The walls pulsed faintly, as if remembering every footstep, every scream, every birth that had ever echoed within them. Vela padded beside him now, no longer snarling, no longer trembling. Her eyes burned steady violet, and her stride matched his. She wasn't a cub anymore, she was something ancient wrapped in the skin of something new. The shrine lay at the mountain's heart, behind doors sealed with breath, not keys. The Empress arrived flanked by 3 flame-bound sentinels and a soul keeper whose eyes had been sewn shut so he could see deeper. "She has not spoken," the Empress said, not looking at Darien. "Not once since her first breath. The bloodline carries silence until a word is earned. No one has ever heard her speak, not priest, not beast caller, not me." Darien turned toward the wolf cub at his side. She gazed up at him, her fur glowing faintly now, pulsing in time with the sigil beneath her neck. The same sigil branded across the soul stone of the Empress's line. "Enter," the soul keeper rasped, his voice like salt over rust. The shrine opened to a circular arena, its ceiling open to the stars though the mountain towered overhead. At the center was a shallow pool, black as space, still as silence. The water did not reflect the walls, only the heart of the one who stood above it. "Step into the mirror of fire," the soul keeper commanded. Darien looked down at Vela. She nodded once. So he stepped. The water didn't ripple. It welcomed him, up to the knees, cold and endless. Then Vela padded forward and sat at the edge. The pool began to glow, not red, not gold. Violet. The room gasped. The Empress narrowed her eyes. Then something moved beneath the surface. The water boiled. Images formed, shapes, moments, bloodline echoes. Ancestral flames rose from the blackness, the first wolf who spoke in lightning, the matriarch who bit through steel to silence a war council, the fire-born twin queens who died on the same day from opposite ends of the galaxy. But then, at the center of it all, her. Vela. Not as she was, but as she would become. Eyes like stars imploding, fangs of gold, wings of dusk. Not literal wings, but metaphor, wings of will. And beside her, unmoving, unburning, alive in her fire, stood Darien. The pool froze. A word formed on the air, not from flame, not from priest, not from the Empress. From Vela. She said one word. Not in old tongue, not in wolf speech. Darien. The light exploded. Guards fell to their knees. The Soul Keeper screamed, tearing the threads from his eyes in wonder. And Empress Zara took a step back. The fire had chosen. Not blood, not legacy. Him. The court was not silent when the Empress returned with Darien. They roared. Nobles shouted, elders hissed. One high-blood even drew a ceremonial blade and threw it to the floor. She spoke the name of a stranger, he snarled. She held a human with no pack, no blood right, no history in the line. Zara said nothing at first. She didn't need to. Darien stood behind her now, not defiant, not proud, just confused. His hands still bore scars from the river. His eyes still held too much humility to be dangerous. And yet, beside him, Vela stood like a queen not yet crowned. She didn't growl. She watched. She was meant to speak the name of fire, another noble cried. Instead she named this outsider. The scavenger, Darien said softly. Because I saved her. I didn't know who she was. I just saw her drowning. She chose you, Zara said, and her voice shut the room down in a breath. She did not speak power. She did not speak legacy. She spoke a name. She turned fully now toward Darien. The old stories speak of a wolf of starlight, one who would be born not of fong and fire, but of choice. One who would see the world not through dominance, but through connection. She stepped down from her throne. All our attempts to shape her failed. All our traditions could not teach her voice. But you, she looked at him hard now. You gave her breath. Darien opened his mouth, but nothing came out. He didn't want a throne or a title. He had just seen something in the water and reached. And yet, all around him, the weight of centuries bent toward his presence. Zara raised her arm, slow and deliberate. Let the stones record it. Let the bloodlines bear it. Vela, flame of the sixth house, heir to the silent howl, has chosen her first word. It is not war. It is not throne. It is not command. Her hand pointed now. It is Darien. And across the galaxy, in dens, in courts, in hidden temples of the old flame wolves, every sentinel knew the fire had a new voice. And it wasn't theirs. The challenge. The wolves of the High Council arrived within 3 days, summoned from hidden fortresses across the stars. They wore no crowns, no medals, just carved bone rings on their left claws that marked them as lords of ancestral flame. They entered the court not as guests, but as judgment. No one greeted Darien. No one even acknowledged his presence except Vela. She had grown since the shrine, subtle but clear. Her stride was more deliberate, her movements no longer clumsy. Her eyes had deepened, not just in color but in awareness. When the emissaries snarled about blood purity and the corruption of sacred rites, she simply stood between Darien and their fangs. Unmoved. The council demanded a severance trial. Zara resisted at first, but she knew the law better than any. The rite was ancient. If the heir's first bond was contested, the bond must survive flame, fong, and fury, or be dissolved. Most severance trials ended in death. Sometimes of the bondmate. Sometimes of the beast. Vela heard the sentence and did not retreat. Instead, she walked to Darien that night, pressed her forehead to his, and whispered two words with certainty and fire: "We fight." The arena was carved into the bones of a fallen mountain god, its floor scorched with the ash of 10,000 challenges. Above, nobles and soldiers watched. Below, the challenger emerged, a war-born male named Threx of the southern Stormbloods. His wolf was monstrous, 8 feet tall at the shoulder, black-eyed, armored in woven steel hide and raised on venomous blood trials. Zara looked at Darien from her seat above, quiet sorrow in her eyes. "You may still refuse. No one will blame you." "I would," Darien answered. Vela crouched beside him. The horn sounded. Threx didn't wait. He lunged, his wolf charging straight for Vela, teeth glowing with fury fire, breath thick with heat. The ground cracked under the force of his stride. Vela met him head-on. She was smaller, lighter, but she moved like a storm in reverse, pulling energy, folding momentum, striking low and fast. The first impact sent sparks flying, but she didn't break. She dodged, rolled, bit the hind leg, twisted, and vanished into the smoke. Threx turned toward Darien, blade drawn. He moved fast, too fast for any untrained man. But Darien didn't reach for a weapon. He whistled once. And Vela returned like a shadow, leaping between them, knocking Threx aside in a blur of claws and fury. The crowd gasped. She stood now between Darien and death, again. But this time with her back to the court. Her growl deepened, not from fear but from understanding. Her voice rose, not as speech, but as ancestral howl. And for the first time in living memory, a young wolf's roar forced a grown werewolf to bow its head. Threx's beast fell still. Vela stepped over to it and licked its snout, a gesture not of dominance, but of peace. The court stood silent. No fire flared. No blood spilled. But the severance was broken, not by victory, but by connection. And when Vela turned to look at Darien, she didn't speak aloud. She didn't need to. He was already walking toward her. After the trial, there were no more whispers in the halls. Only watching. Nobles did not dare to mock. Soldiers stopped staring with suspicion. Even the Empress's most ancient advisors kept their distance, observing not the human but the bond, something older than blood, stronger than flame. Zara summoned Darien privately, late into the black of night. He came without guards, without fear. Vela remained outside, lying calmly in the corridor like a sentinel carved of starlight. The Empress looked more tired than ever before. "You've undone centuries." "I didn't try to," he answered honestly. "No," she replied. "You simply were different." He sat quietly, watching her reflection flicker in the crystalline window. "When I was young," she continued, "I was taught the bond came from lineage. That only flame-born minds could carry wolf song. That any outsider would poison the blood." She paused. "And now my daughter would tear the stars in half to keep you breathing. That is not poison. That is evolution." She placed something on the table between them, a sigil carved into moon iron. A new crest. Not of House Flame Fong, not of wolf blood, but a symbol of two shapes side by side, man and wolf, equal. "You've earned the right to name your own house." Darien stared at it, stunned. "I'm not a noble." "No," she said, her voice softer than the night outside. "But you're what nobility forgot how to be." He picked up the sigil and felt its weight. Outside, Vela lifted her head. The wolves across the palace grounds began to howl, one by one, not in rage, not in mourning, but in welcome. A new house had been born. Not of tradition, but of something far rarer, trust. The legacy. By dawn, every beast across the silver cradle had heard it. The howl of Vela did not carry war behind it, it carried invitation. An unfamiliar chord threaded through its echo, one that turned the heads of old wolves, one that made battle-hardened war beasts pause in the barracks and lift their snouts to listen. For the first time in 1,000 years, a call went out not for dominance, not for vengeance, but for something new. And the galaxy listened. The House of Wex, named for no land, no bloodline, and no conquest, was etched into the archives with reluctant ceremony. Its crest was plain, the outline of a flame inside a wolf's paw print, and beside it, a human hand. Not clenched in a fist, but open. No banners were raised. No anthems composed. And yet within a week, 5 rogue wolf packs, long exiled from the Empress's dominion, arrived at the palace without warning. They knelt before Vela and pledged allegiance to Darien without asking anything in return. The politics turned sour faster than expected. In the far systems of the Shattered Belt, whispers spread that the new house was a threat to tradition. That a human who held a wolf's heart could one day command the beast legions without blood permission. The High Marshal of Gloric issued a challenge by decree, an ancestral remnant from a darker era. Darien Wex must prove the bond is not deception by walking through the Maw of Whispers. The Maw was not a place, it was a test. A cave hollowed by flame centuries ago, said to echo the true heart of anyone who entered. No beast had walked out unchanged. Many had not walked out at all. Darien accepted without hesitation. Vela snarled in protest the moment the decree was read aloud, her claws sparking against the stone floor. But he only knelt to her. "You were alone when I found you," he said. "I won't be the one to fear it now." She whined, uncertain. "I'll come back." And with a soft nose pressed to his forehead, she let him go. He entered the Maw with no blade, no torch, and no sigil. Only silence. Inside, there was no light. Not darkness, no light. Not even the mind's memory of it. It was as though the air swallowed the idea of illumination before it could form. Darien walked forward by feel, his steps echoing in a space that seemed both endless and suffocating. The walls were warm, breathing. They pulsed when he brushed against them. Every time he blinked, he saw flickers, not of vision, but of memory. He saw Vela drowning again. Not as it happened, but as it felt. Her panic. Her fading strength. Her last desperate gasp before his arms wrapped around her. Then the image shifted. He saw himself standing on the court floor, unarmed, with wolves at his back and nobles at his front. He saw what they saw, a man. A human. Soft. Unworthy. Out of place. Then came the voice. Not spoken, not heard. Just known. "What are you?" He didn't answer. He couldn't. He took another step. "What makes you worthy of fire?" More images. His home, shattered by war. His father, gone. His mother, bones in the refugee dust. His first salvaged engine. His first broken promise. And then Vela, curled beside him in sleep, breathing like he was the only reason she could. "What did she see in you?" He clenched his jaw. Not because he knew, but because he didn't. "I didn't ask her," he whispered aloud. "I just held her when she needed it." The air in the cave trembled. Heat surged. Then all around him, light. Not bright, not gold. Just warm. And from the stone above, a mark flared. Shaped like her sigil, but fused with his name. A new glyph, written in flame, embedded in the ceiling forever. He stepped forward, and the path cleared. When he emerged from the Maw, blinking into the twilight, the court was waiting. The Empress. The Council. The Marshal of Gloric. And Vela, who broke formation and bolted into his arms before anyone could stop her. She licked his face once, then sat beside him, eyes burning brighter than ever. The Marshal took one look at the flame glyph pulsing across Darien's back and fell silent. "The fire has spoken," he rasped. Zara nodded once, and the old laws shattered. The bond was real, and now it carried more than love. It carried authority. Years passed. The Empress grew older, but she also grew lighter. She stopped speaking of tradition and started listening to her daughter more. Sometimes she watched from her chamber windows as Darien and Vela ran side by side through the snowfields, laughing, howling, hunting not for prey but for joy. In time, stories spread across the systems. Tales of a man who saved a drowning heir. Tales of a wolf who spoke her first word as his name. Of a bond forged not in battle, but in breath. And of a world where wolves bowed not to fear, but to freedom. When Zara finally passed, the throne stood empty for 3 days. Until Vela ascended, not alone, not crowned, not armored. Just beside him. She spoke her oath in 2 tongues. And when the flame mark of her bloodline flared across the sky, it burned with something new, the shape of a hand and a paw together. The galaxy did not erupt in applause. It knelt. Not because it had to, but because it wanted to. Because it finally understood that sometimes the strongest flame begins not with fire, but with someone who simply refused to let it go out. Darien stood beside the throne, no longer a scavenger, no longer an outsider. He was what he had always been, someone who reached into dark water and pulled out light. And in the years that followed, when children across the stars would ask about the legend of the Wolf Empress and her human bondmate, the storytellers would always begin the same way. Once, in a storm on a distant world, a man heard something drowning and chose not to walk away. The end.